What is going on, investors? Hopefully guys are doing well out there. That is right. It is Friday. It is the weekend, and it is time for the FAANG Stock Recap Show here on the Investor Channel, where every Friday we recap all the major news and the technical chart patterns from all the major FAANG stocks. This week, we had price cuts coming from Tesla. We had Google and Microsoft continuing their strong momentum, and we've got a lot of news to get to, so we better kick things off like we always do with Meta Platforms. Start of the week at 210. This one continuing to drift higher, up about 2.8% to finish the week at $216 per share. We are recording this on Good Friday, where there is no trading here in the United States. Meta needs more than job cuts to show that its fortunes have reversed. This is according to analyst Benchmark. Now, I agree with this to a certain degree, but I think the job cuts and the cost cutting for Meta, that's going to get it to a period of time, maybe get us through the quote recession or the slowdown or whatever you want to call it. And then maybe it gets you to the point where you start to see ads starting to come back. Maybe some of this AI technology, maybe Meta can benefit from some of this stuff. I think it's going to get it through that time. Now, whether or not this $560 billion valuation that continues to hold through earnings, which again are just about a month away for most of these stocks. We'll obviously be here to cover that for you all here on the channel. Moving on to Apple, start of the week at 165, basically finished flat. You'll see from a technical level, it was an area where Apple just naturally will want to stall out. Now, Apple is slated to open its first official retail store in the country of India. Unfortunately, they don't have a picture of it here. It's a very beautiful store. India, obviously a very key growth market for all, I would say all of these companies, but particularly Apple as well, as they're moving some of their manufacturing. Now, speaking of Apple manufacturing, Foxconn, its partner in the country of China and the country of India as well, reported their Q1 results. They were relatively flat year over year, but also gave a little bit of weak guidance. So we'll see how that moves into the tail half of the year, where Apple tends to roll out most of their products. Now, Apple is seeing resilient iPhone demand and is increasing its share in China despite tensions. Obviously a good thing. You're increasing your market share in China. That is going to equal a relatively strong sales for Apple. Now, the company is continuing to have near record iPhone ownership among teens. This is a key survey done by Piper Sandler, I believe maybe every other quarter or so. This obviously bullish for Apple in the next generation, as teens that like the iPhone now, whether or not they are able to pony up $1,000, $1,200, $1,300, $1,500, whatever these phones cost when they are buying them on their own. We'll see what happens, but good news for Apple. Now, Microsoft's new Bing search engine may force Google to, quote, pay up to be the Apple default. It appears that Bing, or at least it's rumored that Bing is going to be at the table to potentially be the default search engine over at Apple. This is just bullish for Apple, because these billions of dollars that Google pays Apple to be the default search engine, it likely almost all flows down to the operating profits and net income number of the services side of the business. And now you've got another strong player with a strong balance sheet and lots of cash willing to maybe pay up to be the default search engine. Well, it's just going to mean more and more profits for Apple. Now, the company is letting go some of its corporate retail employees. These are the first official job cuts since last year by Apple. Now, moved on to Amazon. Started the week at 102, finished roughly flat at about $102. Amazon priced their Luna Plus cloud gaming service just under $10. Now, Amazon Prime members get this service for no extra cost, but it appears that there's a Luna Plus, which maybe gives you access to additional games or something like that, for additional $9.99 per month. This is going to compete with NVIDIA's GeForce Now service and potentially Netflix's streaming video games as well. Now, Google had a relatively popular or well-received version of streaming video games called Stadia, I believe. That was shuttered, though, earlier this year. And you also have xCloud from Microsoft, Amazon, jumping into that video game market. Now, Amazon acquisition of iRobot, which was announced, I believe, last year, is under investigation in the UK. UK. And if this goes similar to the other acquisitions, usually the UK or the European countries are kind of the first to rule on this, and their ruling does maybe hold a little bit of weight here. Now, what's interesting about this acquisition, and we've talked about it, is iRobot was just marginally not profitable. But what Amazon is seeing is a lot of iRobot's products are being sold on Amazon, so you could strip out those commission charges. iRobot was probably paying a lot of advertising costs directly to Amazon as well, so Amazon could strip those out, and so all of a sudden the company will be profitable. So this would be an interesting acquisition for Amazon if it's allowed to go through by the old regulators out there across the world. Now, Amazon eyes to reduce stock awards for employees as Amazon's jumping on board of just tightening the belt. Watch Nike as the, quote, Air movie could spark a buzz for the Jordan brand as if it needed that. Now, the reason why we're bringing this up in Amazon is Amazon Studios is actually the one distributing the Air movie that seems relatively well received. It's not going to be a blockbuster by any means, but it's gotten a lot of press and obviously could be beneficial to Nike as well. Moving on to Netflix, start of the week at 342. This one slid down just a little bit by about 1% to finish the week close to 340. Not a ton of news out of Netflix this week. They report earnings very shortly. Now, moving on to NVIDIA, start of the week at 27. We'll call that 277. Slid down a little bit, although the stock has been, on a rocket ship. Year to date, just up 88%. So look, over the last 5 days to be down 2.3%, probably a good thing, honestly, for the stock. Finished the week close to 270. Now, the company slipped a little bit as Google touted its prowess in its custom chips. Now, Google put out a press release saying their 4th generation TPU chip was, comparable to one of NVIDIA's chips. Well, they were comparing it to a previous generation of NVIDIA chips. So it's not really apples to apples, so to speak. But broadly, what I'm thinking about with this AI space is it very much reminds me of kind of the birth of the internet. What did investors flooded into anything with a .com name? But you look back at the history of a company like Cisco Systems, a lot of like the internet plumbing stocks did relatively well early on. And that kind of reminds me a little bit of NVIDIA and some of these chip stocks. They're going to be the plumbing to the AI. I don't think they're necessarily going to be the long-term winners. It's going to be kind of a shorter-term thing because as Google is proving, these other companies are going to be able to catch up. Now, whether or not they compete and make as good or better products than NVIDIA in the future, I tell you what though, you have AMD, you even have Intel, you have Google, you have Amazon, you have other chip makers out there that are going to compete in this space. But for now, NVIDIA, the clear leader. Moving on to Google, start of the week at 103. Hello, momentum. This one is looking beautiful from a technical perspective, up 4.7%. Those of you that have been patient with Google are about to be rewarded. Now, the search engine is going to feature that chat AI that Bing has already rolled out on their search engine. This is according to CEO Sundar Pichai. He's finally getting on the idea that you just got to keep talking about AI. You keep talking about AI and your stock will just continue to move up and you can deliver at a later date. Now, Pinterest may launch a, quote, meaningfully third-party partnership with Google. This is interesting because I advertise on Bing and a lot of my traffic actually comes through Pinterest. So Pinterest already has a partnership with Bing. It'll be interesting to see if they maintain that partnership. So what Pinterest does is they sell a little bit of their traffic through Bing essentially, and maybe earns a small commission because not enough advertisers like myself go directly to Pinterest, although I honestly probably should. It'll be interesting to see if they're ending that partnership or they're going to layer on Google and Bing as partners. That could be potentially bullish for Pinterest, which is a stock that I've looked at numerous times, and it's really kind of hovered in that like $27, $30 area, and it could be a buy in the near future. Moving on to Microsoft, start of the week at 287. This one also a little bit of momentum this week, up about 1.5%, finished the week at about $291. That Activision Microsoft deal, and boy, I'm going to be excited about not talking about the regulation here, but we expect remedy working papers from the UK agency sometime next week. Now, who is not excited about this acquisition is obviously Sony, and they're slamming the UK for their narrower focus in that deal. This deal looks like it's going to sail through at some point, likely some concessions from Microsoft, but Sony and a lot of these other video game makers just simply don't have ground to stand on. Xbox is not the dominant platform when it comes to gaming, and even Activision is not, while they have a wildly popular game and a franchise, there are other ones out there as well. Microsoft's backed OpenAI, slated to present solutions to Italy after that country banned ChatGPT. This is going to be kind of on a country-by-country basis, and these software companies are going to be able to move relatively fast and meet regulators' demands. Moving on to Tesla, start of the week at 200. This one hit a wall of resistance, down over 7.75% to finish the week at about $185 per share. This is after we got Tesla's March sales in China, as the EVs increased 35% year over year and even 19% sequentially. So from February to March, very strong increases, but a lot of this had to do with price cuts. Now, more on the price cuts with Tesla. They rolled out price cuts here in the United States on all of its models, including the Model 3, by about $1,000. Now, more interesting to me is they implemented a good, better, best business model when it comes to their most popular vehicle, or their best-selling vehicle, the Model Y. So before yesterday, you could only get the Model Y long range, and it starts at close to $53,000 here in the United States, or you could get the performance version, which is a little bit faster but gets a little bit less range when it comes to that battery. Now, what I like what Tesla did is they put something on the quote low end, so something that starts a couple $1,000s lower than the kind of the middle choice. That gets about 30 to 40 miles less on that range, but it could bring in some buyers that want the Model Y but don't necessarily need to pay up for all the extra miles. I love what they're doing over at Tesla when it comes to kind of good, better, best. You look at all the great companies out there, from Nike to Starbucks, even Apple to a certain degree, rolling out that good, better, best model, and Tesla doing that as well. Now, President Joe Biden plans to propose the toughest ever U.S. curbs on auto pollution. This is obviously related to Tesla to a certain degree, because all of Tesla's competition rely on the traditional combustion engine to fund their EVs. Ford announced last week that they lost $3 billion over the last 2 years producing EVs, and so they're basically taking the profits they make from gasoline cars and then putting it into EVs. And Ford said they're not going to be profitable making electric vehicles for another 3 or 4 years, and that's just going to be on an adjusted basis, and it's going to be at single-digit margin. So Tesla cutting prices. Then you have the United States government. Now, I know this is just a proposal, and the odds of this going through and becoming law probably relatively slim, I would suppose, but anything in this area that makes combustion engines likely even less profitable, definitely more bullish for Tesla than it is for other automakers. Now, Tesla's employees shared and made memes of images taken from inside customers' cameras on their Teslas. This is from 2019 to 2020. Internally, employees of Tesla shared these types of things, and those people should be punished. Now, Tesla nearly tripled its total workforce in its Austin Gigafactory, although this is mostly telegraph. So last year they had about 3,500 people working there, but they're scaling this thing up. This year it looks like they have about 12,000 people. Again, that's like a 3 to 4 time increase there. But Elon Musk telegraphed when they opened up in Texas that they were going to create 20,000 direct jobs and 100,000 indirect jobs. So they still have got a ways to go. Moving over to the technical segment of the show, we've got the S&P 500 just walking its way up to the top of the range. Again, this blue block represents a 14 up or down % trading range. So when you guys are watching all that doom and gloom content, just realize for the last year, the stock market's basically been up or down 14%, which is really not scary at all. You like for the S&P 500 over the next week or two? Again, we've got bank earnings next week. Things are going to really perk up here on the Investor Channel. We've got tons of videos that we're going to be posting over the next couple of weeks as we kick things off, really probably next Friday with a lot of bank earnings. You like for the S&P 500 to react positively to that push over, we'll call it 4,200, another 100 points higher, and you've again confirmed higher highs, the higher lows have already been confirmed. You'd like to to confirm higher highs as well. Things look pretty darn good from a technical perspective when it comes to the S&P 500. Now, speaking of looking pretty darn good, is the Meta chart is still just a straight arrow upwards. And if you're like me and you sold back here, yeah, you lost about $30 on that one. This thing just continued to move higher, but we should meet some resistance up here at about right where the stock is. And you'll see this with a couple of other FAANG stocks that we'll be looking at here. They'll meet some resistance, and now they're setting up. What they often do is as you move into earnings, although earnings is a little ways away with Meta we're talking about the 26th of April, just a couple of weeks away, what these stocks tend to do is actually set up at the kind of the top of the range, as investors don't want to be caught missing out heading into earnings. And a lot of these companies have been doing cost cuttings, and they could surprise on the earnings side and the revenue side. And so you could see a continued momentum upwards. I thought for sure we would fill this gap down here with Meta before we filled this one up here between 240 and 300. And now I would say we're at a toss-up. Which gap gets filled first? And obviously earnings on the 26th with Meta will have a lot to do with which gap gets filled. Now, moving on to Apple, very interesting from a technical perspective. You see here, we've been making a lower series of highs since December of last year. So more than a year now, we've been making a lower set of highs. And here we are with Apple. We've just confirmed another lower set of highs. So those of you that are in this markets for the shorter term, this is a place where you take some profits, honestly, because again, you have to assume with technical analysis, the pattern just continues to hold. If the pattern continues to hold, Apple is likely to maybe, if this overall pattern where you have lower highs and lower lows, well, yeah, Apple is going to come back down here and maybe retest an area south of 125. Now, that's very broad. That's something that could play out, quite frankly, maybe for the rest of the year, potentially. As this company reports their earnings, it looks like, give us a little bit of a break, we get this one in May 4th. So we're still about a month away for Apple's earnings. It's already setting up at the top. Now, the other thing that could potentially happen, and what is exciting from a technical perspective, is all of a sudden something different happens for Apple, and then we push higher here, retest these highs back in August of 2022. You push up over 175. Well, all of a sudden, you can take that line away and you can start to look for areas of pullback and accumulation with Apple. Right now, we are in watch mode with that one, and obviously shorter term people can take profits there. Now, moving on to Amazon. This one looks really, really good. Maybe not really, really good, but definitely looks good in the shorter term. We are making a series of higher lows. The higher highs we would like to see confirmed over the next couple of weeks with Amazon. A push really up into kind of the 110s, so 112, 113, 114. Any push up in there really is confirming that you are making higher highs. The higher lows are confirmed. We've got earnings with Amazon coming about 20 days from now on the 27th. A breakdown from this area, while disappointing in some ways, would likely simply mean buyers step in at that south of 90 range with Amazon. Moving on to Netflix, just so pretty what this stock has done from a technical perspective. It broke down earlier in February, bottomed out in March, hit a rebound. We've got earnings very soon when it comes to Netflix. We're talking just 11 days from now on Tuesday, April 18th. This stock looks like to me that it wants to set up maybe towards the highs that you made back in January, February. So a walk back to 360 wouldn't surprise me with Netflix. And then obviously all important earnings. Now, Netflix made some changes in how they're going to report those earnings, no longer reporting subscriber growth or subscriber guidance. So it's going to be all about that revenue and that profit. We'll see how that comes in for Netflix. Moving on to NVIDIA. This one is very similar to Meta, is just in a straight line up. A little bit of a give back, but nothing to be overly concerned about. Those of you that have experienced this ride and want to lock in some profits, somewhere in this range where I'm kind of wiggling this line. So if you're listening to this, you might have to tune in. I would say, I wouldn't want to see this stock break basically 230 on the more conservative side. I wouldn't want to see it break 250. You break 250 and you've broken this kind of very parabolic uptrend. This parabolic uptrend is going going to be broken at some point. Stocks just cannot continue to do this. And in fact, if you're bullish on NVIDIA, you'd actually want to see this broken because it would allow you to have buying opportunities at lower levels. I think those are going to materialize with NVIDIA, and we'll probably take advantage of that when it comes. Now, speaking of just a thing of technical beauty, we talked about last week's show that we would like to see Google. I think it was like right here at about 108, maybe 105. We wanted to see it continue to push higher, get above these highs that you made back in February, right at 108. We hit them right on the nose. I would say from a technical perspective, not quite perfect from a technical perspective, but probably close enough that you made higher highs on Google. If you continue this momentum into next week, it is just confirming higher highs, higher lows. The higher lows are already confirmed with Google. We've got earnings with Google coming up on April 25th, just a couple of weeks from now. Those could be pivotal. My guess is this stock is going to want to try to set up towards the top of the range, and we'll see if sellers are going to materialize. This area where the stock is going to try to power through this kind of 110, 111 range, it's going to be a little bit difficult. Okay, there's a lot of area of consolidation here and a lot of accumulation here, so there is going to be some selling pressure for Google when it makes it up there. Now, Microsoft looking almost identical to Google, probably a step or two ahead of that, as this company also making a beautiful series of higher highs here, higher lows. This is an uptrend. We've got earnings for Microsoft coming up on the 27th of this month. We are expecting now this company to likely have a pullback in the coming days and weeks. To get anywhere on this pullback, you can buy this one. I mean, we were buying this one earlier this year at lower levels. So, I'm not going to take advantage of this pullback. I'm already basically fully allocated to this stock. But those of you that have missed this ride and believe this technical pattern is going to continue to hold could take advantage of that. Moving over to Tesla. Very much like Apple, just hasn't got back to the top of its kind of technical downtrend. So that's kind of good, but in some ways, not that good. It is just has a magnet at this kind of 180, we'll call it 180 to 200 on Tesla is a fair area of consolidation. Anywhere south of there, I think can be a buying opportunity. You see our green box here. Any green box that we have on any of these stocks is an area where I'm interested in accumulating in stocks. So we're still a ways away here. And when you get to the top of the box, it's not that exciting. It's really when you get to towards the bottom end of these boxes, that's when it gets more and more exciting. But from an investment perspective, it actually gets harder and harder. When these stocks get to the bottom of these boxes, that is when the doom and gloom is at its height. That is when everybody is running scared. That is when all the news is really, really bad. And that is why we mark these areas out well in advance. So when the stocks get into these areas, we are able to pull the trigger almost like we're on Tesla autopilot. Folks, that was the end of the FAANG Stock Recap Show. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy your Easter holiday, and we'll see you again next week here on the channel with lots of earnings videos and the FAANG Stock Recap Show on Friday. Have a wonderful weekend out there. Be safe, and we'll see you again next week. Good luck with your investments.